The gravy was cold, congealed in a skin-like layer on top, mocking me. 30 plates sat empty, expectant, like hungry mouths waiting to be fed. I stared at the mountain of mashed potatoes, the dry turkey carcass stripped bare, and the uneaten, untouched cranberry sauce, a monument to my failure. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about Thanksgiving. It was about control. It was about them seeing how much they could take from me before I finally broke. If you truly love your mother and appreciate everything she has done for you, subscribe now to protect those closest to you from the darkness that is coming. From the moment I met Michael's family, I knew I was an outsider. They were old money country club members, the kind of people who summered in Nantucket and wintered in Vail. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment above my mother's laundromat, a world away from their privileged existence. Michael, bless his heart, tried to bridge the gap, but some chasms are too wide to cross. His mother, Eleanor, was the queen bee, and her hive revolved around tradition, appearances, and above all, control. She never outright disliked me, but her subtle digs, her condescending tone, and her constant reminders of my different background were a daily paper cut to my soul. Michael and I had been married for 5 years, and every holiday was a battlefield. Easter meant enduring a passive-aggressive lecture on my unconventional dress. Christmas involved deciphering the hidden meaning behind her carefully chosen, subtly insulting gifts. But Thanksgiving was her masterpiece. This year, she announced, we would be hosting 30 people at our house. "It's time Emily proved herself," she declared, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness that turned my stomach. "She's been part of the family long enough." The menu she presented was a culinary Everest. A 20-pound turkey, ham, stuffing, mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole, green bean almondine, cranberry sauce, both jellied and whole berry, naturally, pumpkin pie, apple pie, pecan pie, and a gluten-free, dairy-free option, just to make things interesting. And of course, everything had to be made from scratch. My name is Emily, and I work full-time as a software engineer. I explained that doing all of this myself, while working and trying to keep the house in order, was simply impossible. I suggested catering or even a potluck, but Eleanor dismissed the idea with a wave of her hand. "Nonsense, dear," she said. "This is a family tradition, and traditions must be upheld." Michael, usually my rock, was strangely silent. He mumbled something about not wanting to upset his mother and offered to help with the dishes. The dishes. He thought helping with the dishes would compensate for me preparing a feast fit for a king and his court, completely alone. I felt a cold dread creep into my bones. This wasn't about Thanksgiving. It was a test I was destined to fail. I spent weeks agonizing over the menu, poring over cookbooks, and practicing recipes. I took time off work, sacrificing my precious vacation days to slave away in the kitchen. I was exhausted, stressed, and resentful, but I was determined to prove Eleanor wrong, to show her that I was worthy of being part of her family. The day before Thanksgiving, I was a whirlwind of activity. I peeled potatoes, chopped vegetables, and wrestled with the enormous turkey. Michael, true to his word, did help with some of the prep work, but his contribution was minimal, and his heart clearly wasn't in it. He spent most of the time on his phone, occasionally glancing up to offer a half-hearted word of encouragement. By evening, the house was filled with the aroma of roasting turkey and simmering spices. I was covered in flour, my hair was a mess, and my feet ached, but I was almost there. Just a few more hours and I could finally relax. That's when Eleanor arrived, unannounced, with her helpful suggestions. She criticized my stuffing, declared my cranberry sauce too tart, and insisted that I add more sugar to the sweet potato casserole. She hovered over me like a hawk, pointing out every perceived flaw and inadequacy. I bit my tongue, trying to remain calm, but her constant nitpicking was pushing me to the edge. Then she delivered the final blow. "You know, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Michael told me you've been having some trouble at work. Perhaps this is all too much for you. Maybe you should just order pizza. It would be far less stressful." The implication was clear. She thought I was incompetent, incapable of handling the task she had assigned me, that I was a failure, both in the kitchen and in life. That's when something inside me snapped. I looked at Alina, her perfectly coiffed hair, her smug expression, and her diamond-encrusted jewelry. I saw not a loving mother-in-law, but a cruel, manipulative woman who delighted in making me feel small and insignificant. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't argue, I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I would simply smile, say, of course, and board a plane. The person I trusted most was Michael. He had told his mother about my work struggles, something I had confided in him in private. He used my vulnerability as ammunition for his mother to further torment me. The day they betrayed me was the day revenge was born. I smiled at Alina, a tight, brittle smile that I hoped concealed the turmoil raging inside me. Of course, I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Pizza sounds wonderful. Why don't you take over? I'm suddenly feeling quite unwell. I think I need to lie down. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I went upstairs to our bedroom, ignoring Michael's confused calls. I threw open my closet and pulled out my suitcase, the one I usually reserved for business trips. My hands trembled as I packed a few essentials: clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not for another minute. Not with them. As I zipped up my suitcase, I glanced at the framed wedding photo on the dresser. Michael and I, young and happy, our faces full of hope and optimism. A wave of nausea washed over me. How could he do this to me? How could he betray my trust so completely? I grabbed the photo and hurled it against the wall, the glass shattering into a million pieces. The sound was immensely satisfying. I booked a one-way ticket to my mother's, needing the comforting familiarity of my childhood home. I left a note for Michael, a single sentence scrawled on a piece of paper. I'm done. Then I slipped out of the house, hailed a cab, and headed to the airport, leaving my old life behind. The next few weeks were a blur of exhaustion and grief. My mother, bless her soul, welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked. She made me tea, cooked my favorite meals, and let me cry on her shoulder. But even her love and support couldn't erase the pain. I replayed the events of Thanksgiving over and over in my head, each time feeling a fresh wave of anger and betrayal. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of Alina and Michael. I saw their faces, heard their voices, felt their judgment like a physical weight on my chest. I lost my appetite and my clothes hung loosely on my frame. My mother worried about me, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. The shame was too overwhelming. I had failed. I had let them win. I spent my days holed up in my old bedroom, staring at my laptop screen, pretending to work. I managed to complete a few assignments, but my heart wasn't in it. I felt like a shell of my former self, hollowed out and empty. One evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I saw a picture of Michael and Alina at a Christmas party. They were smiling, laughing, surrounded by friends and family. They looked so happy, so carefree, as if nothing had happened. A surge of rage coursed through my veins. How dare they be happy? How dare they act like they hadn't destroyed my life? That's when I knew I couldn't let them get away with it. I couldn't just sit back and let them continue to control me. I needed to fight back. I needed to make them pay. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with something far more effective, a meticulously crafted plan. A plan that would expose their lies, reveal their true nature, and dismantle their carefully constructed world. The plan had begun. I stayed silent, because the plan had begun. The first step was gathering information. I started by subtly reaching out to Michael's family and friends, pretending that I missed them and wanted to reconnect. I asked about their lives, their jobs, their hobbies, all the while carefully listening for any clues, any weaknesses, any cracks in their armor. It was slow, tedious work, but I was patient. I knew that every little detail could be valuable. I discovered that Alina's pristine image was a carefully constructed facade. She was deeply in debt, having secretly gambled away a significant portion of the family fortune. She was also having an affair with the golf pro at the country club, a fact that she desperately wanted to keep hidden from her husband. Michael, on the other hand, was struggling at work. He had been passed over for a promotion and was facing increasing pressure from his superiors. He was also secretly addicted to substances, a habit he had managed to keep hidden from everyone, including me. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. These weren't the sophisticated, respectable people I had once believed them to be. They were flawed, broken, and deeply unhappy. And their greatest fear was being exposed. Their biggest weakness, they thought they were untouchable. I spent weeks meticulously documenting my findings, gathering evidence, and building my case. I knew that I couldn't rely on hearsay or speculation. I needed concrete proof. I hired a private investigator to help me track down financial records, obtain photographs, and verify my information. It was expensive, but it was worth it. I needed to be absolutely certain that my plan was foolproof. As I delved deeper into their lives, I discovered a pattern of deceit and manipulation that stretched back for years. Aliner had a long history of undermining Michael's relationships, sabotaging his career, and controlling his every move. She saw me as a threat to her power, an outsider who dared to challenge her authority. Michael, in turn, had become her willing accomplice, desperate for her approval and terrified of her disapproval. He had sacrificed his own happiness and integrity to please her, becoming a shell of the man I once loved. The realization was heartbreaking, but it also fueled my determination. I knew that I had to stop them, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might fall victim to their toxic behavior. The pressure was immense. Sleepless nights were filled with a sense of injustice, the weight of their actions crushing me. I felt myself changing, hardening. The naive girl who had married Michael was gone, replaced by someone far more wary, far more calculating. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about survival. The weight of it all threatened to crush me. I spent days in a darkened room, the curtains drawn, the silence broken only by the occasional sob. Food tasted like ash. Sleep offered no escape, only a relentless replay of Aliner's smug face and Michael's hollow apologies that now rang false in my memory. My mother tried to coax me out, to remind me of my strength, my intelligence, my worth. But her words were like pebbles tossed against a dam, unable to penetrate the wall of despair that had risen around me. I was trapped, suffocating in a sea of my own making. The shame was a constant companion, whispering insidious doubts in my ear. You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. They were right about you all along. I started questioning everything. My choices, my abilities, my very identity. Was I really as strong as I thought I was? Or was I just a naive fool, easily manipulated and discarded? Had I misread Michael all along? Was his love for me just a performance, a way to rebel against his mother's control? The thought was like a knife twisting in my gut. The pain was so intense, so all-consuming that I longed for it to end. Not in a way that would cause my mom further pain, but a quiet, internal surrender. A fatting away. The world seemed bleak, devoid of color, devoid of hope. I was adrift, lost in a fog of despair, with no compass and no destination. One afternoon, as I was aimlessly flipping through channels on the television, I stumbled upon a documentary about honeybees. I watched, mesmerized, as the tiny creatures worked tirelessly together, building their hive, protecting their queen, and defending their territory against invaders. Their dedication, their resilience, their unwavering commitment to their community was both humbling and inspiring. And then, the narrator said something that struck me to my core. When a hive is threatened, the bees will do whatever it takes to protect it, even if it means sacrificing their own lives. A spark ignited within me, a flicker of defiance in the darkness. I wasn't a honeybee, but I was a survivor, and I refused to let Aliner and Michael destroy me. I refused to let them steal my happiness, my self-worth, my future. I realized that I had been so focused on their cruelty, their betrayal, that I had forgotten about my own strength, my own resourcefulness, my own power. I had allowed them to define me, to control me, to dictate my narrative, but no more. It was time to take back my life. It was time to fight back. A plan began to form in the back of my mind, a plan that was audacious, daring, and potentially devastating. A plan that would not only expose their lies and deceptions, but would also dismantle their carefully constructed world, piece by painful piece. The first step was to regain control of my emotions. I started practicing mindfulness, focusing on my breath, and letting go of the negative thoughts that plagued me. I began exercising again, running until my muscles ached and my lungs burned, pushing myself to the limit to prove that I was still capable of strength and endurance. I reconnected with old friends, people who loved and supported me unconditionally, who reminded me of my value and my worth. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to heal. The scars remained, but they were no longer open wounds. They were badges of honor, reminders of the battles I had fought and the lessons I had learned. I started documenting everything, recording every conversation, saving every email, gathering every piece of evidence that could support my case. I knew that Alina and Michael were powerful and influential, and I needed to be prepared for anything they might throw at me. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who specialized in high-stakes divorces. I told her everything, laying bare my vulnerabilities, my fears, and my hopes. She listened patiently, her eyes never wavering, her expression unwavering. When I finished, she simply nodded and said, "We can do this." Her confidence was infectious. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone, I had an ally, and together we would bring them down. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, the first in a long time. The game had changed. I was no longer the victim. I was the player, and I was about to rewrite the rules. I was counting every second. I dove back into my work with a renewed sense of purpose. The coding that once felt like a chore now became a source of focus, a way to channel my anger and frustration into something productive. I spent hours honing my skills, learning new languages, and tackling complex problems. I was determined to prove not only to myself, but to everyone that I was more than capable, more than competent. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, offering my tech skills to help them update their website and improve their online presence. It was incredibly rewarding to use my abilities to make a difference in the lives of others, to empower women who had also experienced pain and betrayal. It reminded me that I wasn't alone in my suffering and that there was still good in the world, even amidst the darkness. The more I did, the stronger I became. The more I learned, the more confident I felt. I was transforming, evolving, shedding my old skin and emerging as a new, more resilient version of myself. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. That day was coming, and I was ready. I was no longer afraid, I was focused, I was determined, and I was ready to unleash the storm. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had won, but they were wrong, so very wrong. I smiled. I played their game. But I was recording everything. My phone became my closest ally, discreetly capturing conversations, documenting inconsistencies in their stories, and preserving every piece of evidence I could find. I knew that if I was going to take them down, I needed to be meticulous, leaving no room for doubt. I started attending family gatherings again, feigning a reconciliation with Michael and Alina. I showered them with compliments, laughed at their jokes, and pretended to be interested in their lives. They ate it up, basking in the glow of my apparent forgiveness. Little did they know, I was simply gathering more ammunition, observing their behavior, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One evening, as Alina was bragging about a recent shopping spree, she let slip a detail about a hidden bank account, one she had been using to funnel money away from the family business. My ears perked up. This was exactly the kind of information I needed. I excused myself to the restroom and quickly jotted down a note, determined to investigate further. The information about Alina's secret gambling debts and the golf pro affair became my primary focus. I realized that exposing these secrets would not only ruin her reputation, but also potentially have legal ramifications. I discreetly contacted a forensic accountant to help me trace the money and uncover the full extent of her financial improprieties. The accountant was a master of his craft, able to follow the money trail with precision and uncover hidden assets with ease. He provided me with a detailed report, outlining Alina's fraudulent activities and providing irrefutable proof of her wrongdoing. The affair was trickier. I needed concrete evidence, something more than just rumors and speculation. I hired a photographer to discreetly capture images of Alina and her paramour together. It took weeks of surveillance, but eventually, the photographer managed to get the shots I needed. Intimate photos that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to Michael. I knew that his substance habit was a major vulnerability, one that could jeopardize his career and his standing in the community. I started subtly planting seeds of doubt in the minds of his colleagues and superiors, hinting at his erratic behavior and his declining performance. I made sure to do it in a way that was deniable, never explicitly accusing him of anything, but simply raising concerns about his well-being. I also learned that Michael had been involved in some shady dealings at work, taking credit for other people's ideas and cutting corners to meet deadlines. I gathered evidence of his misconduct, documenting his unethical behavior and preparing to expose him to his superiors. One close call occurred when Michael unexpectedly came home early from work. I was in the middle of backing up files from my phone to my laptop when I heard his key in the door. Panic surged through me as I frantically tried to close all the windows and erase my tracks. I managed to shut down my laptop just as he walked into the room. He seemed suspicious, noticing my flushed face and my hurried movements. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes narrowed. "Nothing," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Just catching up on some emails." He didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press the issue. He went into the kitchen to get a drink, and I breathed a sigh of relief. That was too close. I knew I had to be more careful. The anticipation was building with each passing day. I could feel the moment of reckoning drawing near, the moment when I would finally unleash my plan and watch their carefully constructed world crumble around them. I spent hours visualizing the outcome, imagining their faces as their lies were exposed and their secrets were revealed. The thought filled me with a sense of satisfaction, a feeling of empowerment that I hadn't felt in a long time. I consulted with my lawyer about the best way to present my evidence and maximize my chances of success. She advised me to file for divorce and seek a restraining order against both Michael and Alina. She also recommended that I contact the authorities and report Alina's financial crimes. I hesitated at first. I wasn't sure if I was ready to go that far to completely destroy their lives. But my lawyer reminded me of everything they had done to me, the pain they had caused, the damage they had inflicted. She told me that I deserved justice and that I shouldn't let them get away with their actions. Her words resonated with me. I knew that she was right. I couldn't let them continue to hurt me and others. I had to take a stand. I decided to follow her advice and move forward with my plan. I drafted a detailed affidavit, outlining all of Alina's and Michael's misdeeds and providing supporting documentation. I included copies of the financial records, the photographs of Alina and her lover, and the evidence of Michael's unethical behavior at work. I also described the emotional distress they had caused me, the anxiety, the depression, and the feelings of worthlessness. I wanted the judge to understand the full impact of their actions and to hold them accountable for their behavior. The day I filed the paperwork was one of the most empowering days of my life. I felt like I was finally taking control of my destiny, reclaiming my power, and standing up for myself. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I was prepared to fight. I was ready to face whatever challenges came my way. I was no longer the victim. I was the warrior, and I was about to win this war. I meticulously documented everything, securing digital backups in multiple encrypted locations. I understood the laws surrounding privacy and data collection, ensuring that every recording was obtained legally and ethically. I researched the statutes of limitations for financial fraud and consulted with my lawyer to ensure that my timing was perfect. I even installed hidden cameras in my own home, not to spy on Michael and Alina, but to protect myself and document their reactions when they learned about my plan. The cameras were strategically placed in common areas, disguised as everyday objects, and programmed to record only when motion was detected. The footage was automatically uploaded to a secure cloud server, where it could be accessed remotely. I knew that they would likely try to deny everything to discredit me and to portray me as a crazy, vengeful woman. But I was prepared for their tactics. I had anticipated their every move and had gathered the evidence to counter their claims. I was ready to expose their lies and reveal their true nature to the world. I said nothing. I remained calm because the plan had begun. They thought they were untouchable. That was their fatal flaw. Eleanor, with her society connections and her carefully cultivated image of respectability, believed she was above the law, immune to consequences. Michael, fueled by his ego and his family's wealth, thought he could charm his way out of any situation, that his lies would always be believed. But I knew better. I had seen their true faces, witnessed their cruelty, and experienced their betrayal firsthand, and I was determined to hold them accountable. The forensic accountant uncovered a web of shell corporations and offshore accounts, all meticulously designed to hide Eleanor's illicit activities. The amount of money she had siphoned away from the family business was staggering, enough to bankrupt the company and ruin the lives of countless employees. The photographs of Eleanor and the golf pro were even more damning, capturing them in compromising positions at exclusive resorts and secluded hideaways. The images were clear, indisputable proof of her infidelity and her reckless disregard for her marriage vows. Michael's workplace misconduct was more subtle, but equally damaging. He had been systematically undermining his colleagues, stealing their ideas, and sabotaging their projects to advance his own career. He had also been using the company's resources for personal gain, charging lavish expenses to his corporate credit card and accepting kickbacks from vendors. I compiled all the evidence into a comprehensive dossier, a damning indictment of their crimes and their transgressions. I presented it to my lawyer, who reviewed it carefully and assured me that we had a strong case. "This is more than enough to bring them down," she said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "They won't know what hit them." The next step was to lure them into my trap, to create a situation where they would be forced to confront their actions and face the consequences. I decided to throw a party, a lavish celebration of our anniversary, a seemingly innocent gathering of family and friends. I sent out elegant invitations, booked a fancy venue, and hired a caterer to prepare a gourmet meal. I made sure to invite all the key players, Eleanor's society friends, Michael's business associates, and our closest family members. I wanted everyone to witness their downfall, to see them exposed for who they truly were. I acted the part of the doting wife, showering Michael with affection, praising his accomplishments, and feigning forgiveness for his past transgressions. He ate it up, completely oblivious to my true intentions. Eleanor was more cautious, sensing that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. She watched me carefully, her eyes narrowed, her expression guarded. But she couldn't resist the allure of the party, the opportunity to bask in the spotlight and flaunt her wealth and status. As the guests began to arrive, I greeted them with a warm smile, making sure to mingle and make everyone feel welcome. I circulated through the crowd, engaging in polite conversation, laughing at their jokes, and subtly steering the conversation towards Eleanor and Michael. I dropped hints about Eleanor's gambling debts, suggesting that she might be in financial trouble. I made veiled references to Michael's workplace misconduct, implying that he might be facing some ethical challenges. I watched as the whispers spread, as the rumors gained momentum, as the seeds of doubt were planted in the minds of my guests. The atmosphere in the room began to shift, the air thickening with tension and anticipation. Eleanor and Michael noticed the change, sensing that something was happening, but they didn't know what. They tried to maintain their composure, to project an image of normalcy, but their unease was palpable. Their biggest weakness, they thought they were untouchable. As the evening progressed, I gathered everyone in the main ballroom, announcing that I had a special surprise for Michael and Eleanor. I dimmed the lights and cued the projector, which was connected to a hidden laptop. A hush fell over the crowd as the first image appeared on the screen, a photograph of Eleanor and the golf pro, embracing passionately on a secluded beach. A collective gasp echoed through the room as the guests recognized Eleanor and realized the implications of the image. Eleanor's face turned white, her eyes widening in horror. Michael stared at the screen in disbelief, his jaw dropping open. I watched their reactions with a cold sense of satisfaction, knowing that their carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around them. The projector continued to display a series of incriminating images, each one more damning than the last. There were photographs of Alina and the golf pro at various locations, engaged in increasingly intimate acts. There were financial records detailing Alina's fraudulent activities, showing the money being siphoned away from the family business. There were emails and text messages revealing Michael's workplace misconduct, documenting his unethical behavior and his attempts to sabotage his colleagues. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and utterly devastating. The guests were stunned, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and morbid curiosity. They stared at Alina and Michael with a mixture of pity and contempt, their respect and admiration replaced by scorn and disdain. Alina tried to deny the allegations, claiming that the photographs were fake and that the financial records had been manipulated. But no one believed her. The evidence was too strong, the accusations too credible. Michael remained silent, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. He knew that he was caught, that there was no way out. The exact day they tried to end me. I exposed the truth. I stepped forward, my voice clear and strong, and addressed the crowd. I told them the story of Alina's and Michael's betrayal, recounting their lies, their deceptions, and their cruelty. I described the pain they had caused me, the emotional distress they had inflicted, and the damage they had done to my life. I spoke with passion and conviction, my words resonating with the guests, who listened in rapt attention. I revealed Alina's secret gambling debts, her affair with the golf pro, and her fraudulent activities. I exposed Michael's workplace misconduct, his attempts to undermine his colleagues, and his unethical behavior. I presented the evidence that I had gathered, showing them the financial records, the photographs, and the emails. I left no stone unturned, no detail unrevealed. By the end of my speech, the guests were seething with anger and indignation. They turned on Alina and Michael, showering them with insults and accusations. They demanded answers, demanded explanations, demanded justice. Alina and Michael were completely overwhelmed, unable to defend themselves against the onslaught of criticism. They were trapped, exposed, and utterly humiliated. But the final blow was yet to come. I turned to Michael, my eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "There's one more thing," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something that I've been keeping secret for a long time." I paused, taking a deep breath, bracing myself for what I was about to reveal. "Michael," I said, "you're not the only one who's been keeping secrets. You see, I'm pregnant." The room went silent. The guests stared at me in disbelief, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. Michael's eyes widened, his mouth dropping open. He looked at me, then at Alina, then back at me, his expression a mask of bewilderment. "Pregnant." He stammered, his voice barely audible. "But how?" I smiled, a knowing smile, a smile that revealed the full extent of my plan. "Not with your child, Michael," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "With his." I pointed to a man standing in the corner of the room, a man who had been watching the entire scene unfold with a quiet sense of satisfaction. A man who was none other than Michael's own business partner, David. The silence hung heavy, punctuated only by Michael's ragged breathing. David stepped forward, a mixture of triumph and regret in his eyes. He confirmed everything, their secret affair, the plans they had made, the future they had envisioned together. He spoke of Michael's neglect, his arrogance, and his inability to appreciate what he had. Alina, forgotten for a moment, let out a guttural scream, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. She lunged at me, her nails extended like claws, her eyes blazing with fury. Security intervened instantly, pulling her away before she could reach me. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect socialite shattered completely as she was dragged, screaming obscenities, from the ballroom. Michael stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and despair, the blood draining from his face. He looked from me to David, then back to me, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of his betrayal. The business associates, the society friends, the family members, all witnesses to his complete and utter destruction. In that moment, Michael lost everything: his wife, his child, or so he thought, his reputation and his future. The police arrived shortly after, alerted by my lawyer. Alina was taken into custody, facing charges of fraud and embezzlement. Michael was escorted out as well, his career hanging by a thread, facing potential investigations into his workplace misconduct. The fallout was swift and brutal. Eleanor's name became synonymous with scandal, her social circle evaporating overnight. Her assets were frozen, her reputation ruined, her freedom threatened. Michael was fired from his job, his family name tarnished beyond repair. His friends abandoned him, his colleagues shunned him, and his family disowned him. He became a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. The company, once thriving, teetered on the brink of collapse, the weight of Eleanor's financial misdeeds threatening to sink it entirely. Lives were upended, fortunes were lost, and legacies were destroyed. The party, intended to celebrate an anniversary, became a funeral pyre for their lies and deceit. The hidden cameras, still recording, captured every agonizing moment of their downfall, providing irrefutable evidence of their guilt. The footage was leaked to the press, ensuring that their shame would be broadcast to the world. Their attempts to control the narrative, to spin the story in their favor, were futile. The truth was out, and it was relentless. They tried to blame me, to paint me as a vengeful, scorned spouse, but their efforts backfired. The public, disgusted by their actions, rallied behind me, praising my courage and applauding my resolve. In the days that followed, I filed for divorce, securing a favorable settlement that left me financially secure and free from their toxic influence. I cooperated fully with the authorities, providing them with all the evidence I had gathered, ensuring that Eleanor and Michael would face the full consequences of their actions. I watched as their lives unraveled, as their carefully constructed world crumbled into dust. I felt a sense of closure, a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. The pain of their betrayal began to subside, replaced by a sense of strength and resilience. I had survived, I had triumphed, and I had emerged stronger than ever before. The child, of course, wasn't David's. There was no child. It was the final twist, the perfect touch to seal their fate, a lie to expose their mountain of lies. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.